Hey guys, welcome back to Custom Hearthstone Concepts. So, I loved elementals in Un'Goro, but I feel like they have a lot of unexplored space. Only Mage and Shaman have any real synergy with them, but based on Lyra and Radiant elementals, I felt there was some room for Priest to have fun with this minion tag. So let's just dive into some custom cards. Ready? To start things off, we have a fairly simple spell. For 3 mana, Lyras Aid deals 3 damage, gives you a random priest spell, and counts as playing an elemental. In other words, even if you only play this, you can still play something like Servant of Kalamos or Blazecaller at full power. Design-wise, this card is fairly simple. It's basically a Lyra in a bottle. However, just because of how elementals work, I think the added flexibility of a non-elemental turn in an elemental deck would be interesting in and of itself. Next up, we have an actual elemental minion. The 6-mana Holy Fire Defender, which, assuming you played an elemental last turn, has lifesteal and deals 3 damage to a target character. And yes, that would have lifesteal as well, as it is damage from the minion. I think this card would end up being a staple in any Priest elemental deck, especially since many powerhouse elementals for that deck are 5 mana, and this would hit the board right after, setting up for a Blazecaller turn, and just overall giving you a bit of sustainability. Overall, I don't think a card like this would be broken, but this alone would most likely cement elementals in Priest as an archetype to some degree. Next we go back to spells with a fairly simple elemental buff, Divine Bracers. For 2 mana, you can add +3/+3 and taunt to an elemental, but it loses its ability to attack. Much as I don't know if this card would be run in decks in and of itself, the nature of Priest elementals from these cards focus on spells and value, and getting something like this off of Lyra isn't entirely useless, especially if you already have a high health lifesteal minion on the board. It's definitely not the strongest card, but I still feel it has a place in this set of custom cards. The next card we have is a fairly simple design comparatively, but it will be important for our last card, so bear with me here. Also, the alliteration is fun. Sacred Sunshard is a cheap elemental at 3 mana, built similar to a Rager with 4/2 stats, but its power comes from its Battle Cry and Death Rattle. On play, you discover an elemental, and when it dies, you shuffle a copy of that elemental into your deck. Again, this is an incredibly simple design, but it would help the archetype, especially when we look at this last card. Invoker Bright Dust is a powerhouse 7-mana legendary that is not an elemental, but instead has the ability to draw cards at the end of your turn, equal to however many elementals you played last turn. In other words, you can refill your hand relative to how many elementals you played the turn before. I think there's a number of unique aspects to this card, not least of which is setting up for it. It's also interesting in regards to counterplay. For example, if you only play 1 elemental, your opponent might not worry about it, but if you dump 3 elementals or more onto the board, your opponent has an opportunity to keep your hand nice and small if they can kill the Invoker. Overall, I will say 5/6 stats would probably keep it from those levels of interaction in serious high-level games, and it mostly would be used for single-hand refills and then get killed, but it is still a unique design that I am happy with, and I would love to try and build a deck with this card. One last comment on it is that its draw is relative to elementals played, so potentially you could play a cheap aggro elemental priest and use this to refill after playing 5 elementals or so and try to do that turn after turn. But I digress. You can theorycraft from there, I'm sure. Thanks so much for watching. In case you couldn't tell, I enjoyed making this video, and pretty soon I have a fairly unique custom Hearthstone cards and honest Hearthstone cards video coming out, so please consider subscribing if you haven't yet. Other than that, I just hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think of this design space, and for the time being, toodles.